taking action about governance of protected areas at the level of a system. And someone in one of the big presentations at the Congress in one of the last days says, why bother about saving nature? I nearly fell off my chair because I thought that this was really obvious. Why bother about saving nature? But we can indeed ask ourselves, why bother about governance of protected areas? I mean, why should we go about? Because it may be just another burden on a very heavy schedule of managers and stakeholders and right holders for protected areas. So why bother about governance of protected areas? There are a few answers here, and I'm sure you may have some more. Well, the first thing is that it has been found, and it has been found really by people who have been analyzing and studying several cases, that governance is a key determinant of effectiveness and efficiency of conservation. It has also been found that it is also a key determinant of appropriateness and equity, and in fact, sometimes governance types do change in order for appropriateness and equity to improve. It has also been found that in a way, in order to embed protected areas into the larger society, you have nothing better to deal with than issues of governance of protected areas. CBD parties have also agreed to report about governance of protected areas, because this is one of the elements of the program of work on protected areas of the CBD. So they have to report about. So if they don't assess and evaluate what they do, how can they report about? And finally, governance being such a fundamental element of protected areas, we know that governance can be improved. So by improving governance, we can equip ourselves much better to face challenges and the global change ahead. So these are a few reasons why governance should be part of the schedules, of the plans, of the interest concerns of thoughtful and forward-looking people of all types, stakeholders, right holders, managers involved with protected areas. Now, more specifically, the CBD decision 18 of COP9 says that the parties need to establish multi-sectoral advisory committees in support to the implementation of COPA, giving special attention to governance issues by diversifying and strengthening protected areas governance types. So governance types is language that's entered CBD. 193 countries are parties to the CBD. And establishing effective processes for the full and effective participation of indigenous and local communities. Notice that peoples is not here, but we mean indigenous peoples and local communities in the governance of protected areas. Further to that, the CBD Secretariat asked for technical support to help understand and take action about governance. And the IUCN and WCPA in particular, but also associated collaborators and parties, have been just happy to respond to that request for help. GIZ, the ICCA Consortium, and the IUCN are the parties that collaborated in putting together a document that is now going to be part of the guidelines of best practice for WCPA IUCN, focusing on this topic. So let's start from the basics about assessing and evaluating a system, the governance of a system of protected areas. I'm pretty sure that you know the difference between assessment and evaluation very clearly, but just to remind you, assessment, a process by which you gather information, you identify what you need, you collect it, you analyze. Evaluation, you take your results of the results of the assessment and you look at them vis-a-vis some goals and values that you hold dear, and you identify needs for change and develop recommendations, basically. And then what makes the whole process meaningful is the final step of taking action. Because you can assess to death, you can evaluate to the point of being bored and crying, but unless you do take action of that, about that, your work is going to be absolutely inane and useless. Among the basics as well, you have to understand the levels of action. You can have assessment and evaluation at the protected area site, and assessment and evaluation at the system of protected areas level. That system does not necessarily be national. It could be, in fact, even beyond one particular country, but it can also be subnational. Sometimes you can have a system of protected area assisted by the same technical institution, or a system of conserved areas by a federation of indigenous peoples. So you may want, in fact, to use the definition of the system for the purpose of what your assessment evaluation is about. And then you need to choose an approach. Are you going to have an expert evaluation? Maybe 2, 3 very famous experts that you're going to contract, give them a fat salary for a few days, they come and they do their own assessment and evaluation, they leave you with a report and gone. Or you want to have a small group, maybe some of the key staff of the protected areas will pull together a group and go through the steps themselves, maybe consulting with others, but not involving others. Or you may want to go for a more or less full-bloom participatory assessment and evaluation in which you try to incorporate in an active role as many right holders and stakeholders as you can. That's another basic point that you have to choose at the beginning. In the guidelines, we actually outline some pros and cons of taking one or the other of this approach. And let me now call your attention for what we identified as a possible, among the many possible, but one possible way of going for an overall process of assessment and evaluation of a system of protected areas. We started thinking that you must have some small group of people who decide to do it. They could be from various agencies of various starting points, and they are most likely not a multi-stakeholder advisory committee such as the one recommended by the CBD, but they might be having some sort of roots in different right holders and stakeholders. But this group, essentially, if I can find the arrow, essentially this group, we imagine, would start planning for the whole of the process. And the first thing it would have to do, it would have to figure out who should be involved, really, and what are the data and the information that needs to be collected. And the fact that there is some guidance that is going to be provided maybe can give them some starting points, some ideas, some questions to put in their minds. But basically, it is the knowledge, the capacity, and the integrity of this group that is going to really shape the whole process. So once this group has clarified the objective of the exercise and the data and the people that would like to get involved, there is a span of time that needs to be available to them to do it, to go collect, to go speak, to help possibly some right holders to get organized to participate in the assessment and evaluation process. Because often people are there, they are subjected to the protected area or other phenomenon that we want to assess and evaluate, but they are not organized to really take part in the assessment and evaluation. So even that element of organization need to be fostered. So during this period that may last, we said 6 months, but could last much, much longer, here you have the need to pull together all you need for the time in which you're going to get serious and try to have an overall assessment and evaluation. Now, the time that we put in brackets are really indicative. It may very well be much longer. In particular, if you take seriously this phase, we were in the taxi this morning with 2 people who are in the room now, with David and Kai, and we were saying this particular period could in fact be so important from the point of view of some of the stakeholders that you may have to expand it really quite a bit in order for the stakeholders to do their own internal assessment of what is going on and be ready to discuss with others. Whatever length this crucial moment of assessment and evaluation and planning for action may have, if we are following the recommendations of CBD, we are going to have here a group that is a multi-stakeholder advisory committee for the program of work on protected areas. So better be complete, better be representative of the key right holders and stakeholders for the system. And finally, the indispensable element is that we get people moving at the end. That this is not going to stop everything at this point, but is going to really initiate action responding to the recommendations of assessment and evaluation. So I don't think I'm going to want to bore you excessively with the matter of the steps, but in the guidelines we have devised a number of steps, and if we would have had more time this morning at the end of the initial presentation, you remember I jumped through 2, for me, crucial points. One is history and another one is political economy. But if you follow the whole train of thoughts, they are so fundamental that they should be taken into account, definitely. So I put them in the steps, to be sure, and for a particular individual protected area site, okay, let's follow the suggested steps. First is analysis of the establishment situation. Who actually established the protected areas, where it came from, who took a role, what instruments, what powers went into this. More broadly, what is the history and culture of the whole surrounding society? How are protected areas understood? What needs they respond to? In what circumstances certain rights have been added to or taken away from certain people in order to establish protected areas? And are we responding to the culture of the particular situation or not? What institutions and what social actors were involved? The analysis here can go very much in depth and better be. And then what we sort of did today, which can be multiplied for a variety of decisions. I mean, what is, even broadly, the governance types? What sort of lexicon can we have to understand the governance situation? Who takes the key decisions and how? The how is what Barbara tried to describe to us through the 5 principles. Are we vis-a-vis the 5 principles? Are we behaving in terms of the decision making? And this sort of gets us through a basic assessment that then can be looked in terms of a couple of main questions. One is, does the governance type, how appropriate is the governance type fitting for its own reality and context? and the context is ecological but also social, cultural, etc. And the second main question is, do we follow the governance principles accepted by this society? Means, is the quality of our governance good, acceptable, bad, can it be improved, and so on. And then, of course, taking action. So this is very roughly, and yes, please.
I want to interrupt.
No, please.
Just wondering where the legal aspect is. Whether it's a theme which permeates all.
Absolutely.
If it's not something which one should specifically lay out.
Yeah.
Because it does underpin every one of those. And breaking down and trying to understand that the legal framework at play, the 10-year management
Yeah.
context.
You will see that is more explicited in the system analysis, because we looked at the range of possible legal types. It is assumed somehow that when we say governance type, we look at it from the de facto situation, but of course also from the de jure situation. So it is implicit, but thank you for saying, because I should probably make it explicit also here. So it's definitely point taken. Thank you. So this is for one side, and it is a simplified sort of process with respect to what's the suggested pathways. The suggested pathways for the system. Now, these steps all need some accompaniment, some tools, some help. So, in particular, today, as part of this workshop, we would like to discuss with you two tools that can play a role on this, as well as in the assessment of the system of protected areas governance. So, one is a group exercise to examine and discuss the appropriateness of the governance types. It's actually part of a broader tool that tries to see also whether the management category is appropriate for the particular situation. So that the two are embedded into the same tool, and this is something quite simple that can be used by a multi-stakeholder committee or any group of people, really. It's a set of questions, you just come up with scores, and at the end you figure out whether or not this seems to be very appropriate, the governance types. And then the second tool is another guidance to a discussion, some questions posed about governance quality. But of course, this can be broadened anytime to embed different types of ethical principles, as our friend is rightly reminding us all the time. Assessing and evaluating governance for a system of protected areas. As you see, I have a few more steps because a system is more complex than a site. Listening, listing, and mapping. Of course, in a system you have more than one protected area, so you better know what you're talking about. So first you list them and figure out how many they are, where they are, etc. And as much as possible you map them on a spatial framework. Again, as before, history and culture, institutions and social actors involved in the development of the system, and then what Sandy was reminding us about, conservation de jure. Yes? Yes, please.
So the conservation of that area is only the one aspect. We're dealing with a number of these areas, the land tenure aspects, the beneficiation aspects are simply important. So I wonder if it's worthwhile including those in the scheme as well.
Very good point. Maybe we should make a broader, you think, how would you phrase that? An analysis of legal instruments that allow land ownership, or?
I think you could just frame it as important legal domains which impact on the potential functioning or the potential prospects of these areas, or the shape of these areas.
You will see that these things are actually coming back at the level of the governance analysis. I mean, how can I point this? Yes. at the level of the governance analysis, looking at exactly what you just said, but it can also be done as a sort of pre-analysis so that we can overlap it later on.
Because I think that very much informs your type of governance. I think it's a preliminary inquiry rather than a retrospective inquiry or something like that.
There is another person wanting to speak.
I'll just make the point that I'll just make the point that I think that is a really important point, this one, because, you know, particularly when we are talking now about not just system of protected areas as such, but how protected areas are part of other systems. And then you've got the multiple land tenures, but within that you also have, you know, different type of rights, you know, of access, you know, that you need to be considered. So I totally agree with his point, and it certainly has been experienced from my practice, let's say in Australia, with what's happening with indigenous protected areas and that are embedded within other systems of broader protected areas.